Hey guys, what is up? I've got some good spear ganks for you today. Actually, I got a number of clips in the last week or so that I thought were all video worthy. In fact, a great many of them ended up on the cutting room floor. And I've got a number of other clips. Some of you may be aware that I've been trying something out new. I've been throwing down my white sign outside the spear fight, not for people to summon me, but just as an indication that I'm not only playing, but I'm trying to get in as a spear, and I'm not in a spear fight, and that's why people can see my sign. So people that want to fight me as a spear have some sort of indication. So I'll leave more info about that in the description. I've got a Twitter account that I'm using to advertise that as well, so more to come. To the fight here, these guys, this is a very difficult setup to deal with. Two people that are turtling up and pressuring you and trying to flank you. I swapped over to the Night Slayer ring. That makes life immeasurably easier. I took a chance and threw out a second R1, blasted into the Lothric Night Shield. I'd already swung a few times, only ever once, and he didn't try to parry, so it seemed pretty safe, and I was rewarded with a guard break. And I know I've mentioned this before, but the orbs that you throw out, people like to block those. They do a lot of stamina damage. That in conjunction with a great sword, where they're turtling up, they're not lowering their guard. That's really helpful. And so now I'm just going to one-hand the greatsword, try to use my S-Dock to pressure this guy, get some bad spacing there. I tried to kind of run out of his range and space out his ultra curved greatsword, came back in too early. But it doesn't really matter at this point. The fight is essentially over. The ending is mere formality. So here I find myself spawning into a 3v1. Then one of the Sunbros is actually using Emit Force, which is kind of actually an interesting strategy, and in a gank would be really powerful. But here with a 3v1, I have enough poise to tank it most of the time, so I'm not too worried about it. This Sunbro here made a mistake. He blundered into the spear fragment spears and ended up getting chewed up. And actually, I got a comment on one of my videos recently asking me about my sort of strategy with the spear fragment. And I'll show some examples coming up here in a little bit. But in essence, the way that I look at the spear fragment, in a 1v1 or a 2v1, I use them almost exclusively for healing because it doesn't regenerate that quickly, and what you don't want to have happen is you use the spear fragment for some other reason and then suddenly you find yourself needing it to heal and you've got to wait for it to regenerate. That's no good. So I only use it for that reason in the 1 and 2v1s, but in 3 and 4v1s it regenerates so quickly. Like in a 4v1, I think I timed it, it was like 10 seconds after you use it, that thing's available for use again. And so it makes sense to just keep throwing it out there. And it would seem that people would not be stupid enough to blunder into it. And I actually don't think it's actually stupidity. I think there's just a lot for people to manage during a fight. There might be a guardian, there's you. There's so many things going on that they're trying to process. And it's just all too easy to end up blundering into one of those things. So I like to throw them out. I like to use them to try to split the party. You also get passive poise after you use it, so that's sometimes a reason in some very special cases to use it, maybe in a 1v1 if you think you can bait somebody into trading with you. I've only done that a handful of times. It's really mostly a tool for healing and secondarily to try to split groups up and just frustrate them. And you'll actually see a fight coming up where unbelievably the party just didn't seem to understand how the spears worked at all, and I was able to punish the team over and over and over. And given that they'll take 200, 400 points of damage every time they blunder into that thing, and if you've got the whole party blundering into that thing, that's a really good reason to use it. That's a massive amount of damage, the most damage probably you can do with a single attack as a spear. So this fight was sort of interesting. I had actually fought this party once before, and the problem that they gave me in the previous fight and the problem they're about to give me in this fight is when I go after the Phantom. Normally when you go after a Phantom in a 2v1, the host will take that opportunity to try to dispatch the Guardian. He doesn't do that here. He gets after me to try to keep me from roll catching and pressuring the White Phantom. And you can see he's actually doing a pretty good job of it. He's chipping my health down, which is actually really annoying. So annoying. In fact, I think here I give up the chase, but the cost to the host is he's leaving the Guardian alone, so the Guardian's at pretty high health. He's throwing out Soothing Sunlights. I'm healed back up to full. So I don't really think it's the right strategy. I think the host probably would have been better served going after the Guardian, But then again, had he done that, I probably would have killed the Phantom by then. It doesn't really matter because the Phantom has no vigor. I'm able to put him away after only a single backstab. Now I remember from my previous fight that this guy likes to turtle up quite a bit, but I don't switch over to the Night Slayer right away. He like swings out a stun lock. He plays very aggressively, so I decide to throw on Night Slayer and watch the difference here with Night Slayer up. Oh man, that guy just gets his guard absolutely shreked, and of course he started panicking, and so having his guard broken made him want to throw up his guard again, and of course that was just a very vicious cycle for the host. Okay, so this was a funny gank. I had actually fought these guys, I think, once before at this point, maybe even twice before. And you can see the Sunbro there. I think it's like Mr. Scored or something, throwing out Boulder Heave. Was actually a reasonable pyro to use. Unfortunately, he wasn't minding his R1 button, threw out a few too many R1s, and ends up getting backstabbed for it. But because of his extraordinarily high defenses, he's still got a bit of health to him here. I think I have to poke him just a couple more times. He's got his shield up, which is bad news for this S-Stock, but fortunately I think it was actually the orbs that busted his guard, or he might have been at like 0 stamina and I rolled into him. I'm not quite sure. I don't think it was the S-Stock poke though that broke his guard, but yeah, that was all for Sir Squirt. And I remember this guy, this host, likes to go for his reaction parries, and I've really incorporated the whole concept of L1 waggling into virtually all of my weapons, especially like with a greatsword, because somebody who wants to reaction parry a greatsword one-handed or two-handed, if they just sit on the R1, they can actually get it. In fact, I had Mr. Silly Dog do it to me during one of Pinko's streams months ago, and so I'm always wary of that, and I knew from previous fights that this guy wanted to try to reaction parry me. Fortunately, I was able to abuse the poise mechanism a little bit and go through his rolling R1, and then as I caught him in his startup frames in there, I knew he was going to try to parry the roll catch, so I delayed it just a fraction of a second, and it was enough to get past his parry. So this here's a 4v1, and I actually trimmed like the first 3 or 4 seconds because the video is really herky-jerky. That happens sometimes when there's like a ton of things going on the screen, like in these cases with a 4v1, but it settled down quite nicely. This was an interesting fight. I thought about going after that white Phantom there, but it looked like he might have been fast rolling, and this early in the fight, I didn't want to get too focused on any one Phantom, especially because I think he had over half health left. It just didn't make sense at this point, so I'm just trying to buy myself a little bit more time, assess what's going on. There was no sense in committing that early. I mentioned earlier people that will just blunder into the spear fragment. This party was like that. I mean, they were so thirsty, and they came at me with such reckless abandon, and even after the first time I used the fragment and the second time, it really didn't dissuade them. So if that's the case, I'm going to keep throwing that thing out there and let them throw themselves into the blender. And here I've got the host obviously at low health. I'm trying to kind of weave between the rest of the party, rely on my poise where I can. This guy's doing an okay job though of staying out of the blender. He's got his shield, and finally the orbs are able to finish him off, and I love this ending here. Everybody just stands here stone-faced. I want a screenshot of that as I think my new wallpaper. Okay, for this fight, actually, I fought this crew 3 times, and I'm going to show you 2 of the 3 fights, and it's kind of disappointing because the 3rd fight was so epic. It was actually one of the best fights I'd ever recorded, or rather thought I recorded. I ran out of space on my recording device. I was pretty disappointed about that, but the first 2 fights are still really good, albeit not as good as the 3rd. I'm going to show you a couple of things that I've been working on. I think I mentioned some people I've been working on starting to learn how to swap. I've been doing pretty well against the Drake Bloods. I'm gonna have to break it out in PvP here pretty soon. I have not done that yet. This guy's doing a reasonable job here of avoiding my S-Stock pressure, and actually as these fights went on, the Sunbro got increasingly sophisticated about evading me. He started running over by the host more, which is a really smart thing to do. But at this point, this is the first fight. He hadn't yet really learned his lesson. And here, I throw out a Bountiful Light with no spear fragment, kind of as like a taunt or challenge to the host. Like, he's been playing so passive, trying to encourage him to come in a little bit. go for the locked on BS. If he had swung out of that, I would have gotten it, but he ran off. And here I try to be fancy and switch to the cestus for the parry, but I was just a little bit tardy, so I didn't get it. And there I throw out the weapon art just to make sure I've got enough poise to trade with him, because I knew he was going to throw out that L1. It paid off, and here I am finally running him down. He hasn't thrown out any parries yet, which I was a little wary of at first. Most Farron users will. So that was the first fight. On to the second one. So as an aside, I hate the way you spawn and end up sometimes covered in, I can't remember what that guy's name is, the tall one that supposedly beckons you in is the spear, but he frequently obscures your vision. You can't see what's going on. You have no idea if people are standing around you, and it's just really agitating. And I wish they would have maybe thought that through a bit better. And in fact, it can sometimes be even worse. Sometimes when he dies, he can actually push you out of the spears. And I've had times where I've been casting Bountiful Light, and I get pushed out of the spears mid-cast, and that's always a little bit terrifying. So neither of these guys are being very aggressive, which obviously makes it difficult to fish. And of course the other one's just waiting in the wings, so the moment you engage with one of them, the other one's going to run up, so I can really only throw out 1 or 2 attacks at most, and then I have to unlock, rotate my camera, find the other player who undoubtedly at that point is charging up behind me. So I'm trying to figure out how to work with these guys, and I decided at first I was going to go with the spear, and then I changed my mind and decided to go with the straight sword. Essentially, I need something where I can swing quickly, because they're being so passive. As soon as I get close, they're just going to reaction roll my great sword, and then I'm going to immediately have to disengage. I can't really pressure them at all. But now that I've got the Phantom down at half health, now I'm going to try to pressure him. Now I know the host is right behind me, but fortunately he's got a Farron, which makes it hard for him to pressure me. But to the extent that this Phantom is smart enough to roll in towards his teammate, then that makes my job a lot more difficult. But fortunately I was able to put him away anyway. So here I really should not be pursuing the host here, and I kind of go for a half-ass Estus punish, but really what I should be doing, actually before I talk about what I should have been doing, I should have been healing. That's something else I've been working on with the Farron Greatsword, because I hate facing this thing so much. So any edge I can get against it, I'm going to look for. And I've long known that you can backstab the L1, especially if they're locked on. So I've been working hard at trying to outspace the L1 and then come in and punish it with a backstab. And I've actually gotten pretty good at it, so that's been pretty reliable. I left this one in, it was kind of funny. I got a cheeky quiet resolve from the Sunbro in the beginning. I've actually got a number of clips. I didn't mention this earlier. I've got a number of clips that I collected from folks in the community who answered sort of my challenge with my white sign, who came in to fight me as a Spirit of the Church. I got a lot of really good fights as a result. This here is not one of them, but I thought about maybe I'm gonna make a video dedicated solely to those fights, because there were a lot of really good fights that I had. So stay tuned. I think I might be doing that soon. Thanks everybody, take care now.